Hey, what's up, friends? Grant Bolden here. Welcome back to the Speaker Lab podcast. Hey, excited for this one. I mean, they're all good ones, but we got another special one here for you. We got the legend himself, Mr. Erick Rheam, who, I mean, I don't know that I think this is an unofficial record, but he has the most appearances on the podcast. So congrats to you, Eric. How does that make you feel?
Man, I have a lot of awards at this stage of life. This is my
Do you,
this
wait,
is
do
my
you
greatest
though? Do
achievement.
you have a
This is,
lot of,
oh,
like, what defines
oh
a
yeah.
lot of awards?
Oh man, you just go check it out, man. I got a whole storage unit just for that. I've been around for 51 years now, Graham. I'm not messing around. But
You're a
this is
legend.
probably my greatest lifetime achievement right here. I think you should send me something like a plaque or something like that. That'd be fantastic. Let's do that.
We'll find something. We got to count it up at some point. Eventually, we'll get around to counting it up. We're over 500 episodes now, so that's a lot to sift through to find your name. But maybe someday on a lazy Friday afternoon, we can do that. In the meantime, though, let's get to some content. One of the things that we have done for the past couple of years is we do at the beginning of the year, we usually do kind of a state of the speaking industry. So I think that we're noticing some trends that we're seeing. And we realized we didn't do that at the beginning of 2024. And so at this point, we're in the summer of 2024. And so we thought we'd check in with you and see what are we seeing right now? And so let's jump right into it. Your business is continuing to do incredibly well. And I know that you're doing a variety of different types of gigs. But first of all, just from a high level, what are some of the trends that you are seeing in your business and maybe at a bigger level within the speaking industry right now?
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why we didn't get together for this thing, Grant, because I'm busy, man, because the speaking industry is white hot. I'm too busy on the road to be doing these right now. And so that's why we had to delay this a little bit, but it is hot. I'll tell you what's interesting is a couple of things is I'm on year 10, Grant. You and I met. Isn't that amazing? We met almost 10 years ago now. Right. So I'm 10 years as a speaker. The reason why that's important is there's some studies out there that suggest that 7 out of 10 speakers don't make it to year 10. So I'm not a statistic. And so that's a tribute to the Speaker Lab because I got great training from you, but it's also a tribute that the speaking business is hot too. And so something that I'm noticing, so I've been doing it for 10 years. This is probably the hottest it's been for me since I've been doing this. It's probably for several reasons. Probably my industry, I think, is part of it. Part of it's because I've just built a nice base of people who trust me. So that's part of it. But also, I think what I've seen is event planners are bullish about the future. And so the biggest trend that I'm noticing is I'm booking events far out in advance, way farther than I've ever have. Check this out, Grant. I've signed contracts and got deposits for gigs in 2026.
Sheesh.
Okay, not 2025. 2026 signed contracts with deposits in the bank 2026. I even have event planners that are asking me to hold events for 2027 just because it's freakishly stupid to do contracts in 2027, but they're like, hey, can you hold this date so as we get closer we can then talk about in earnest and hiring you? That tells me that they're bullish about the future, number one, but also tells me that they're leveraging speaker relationships, right? So event planners are going to speakers that they know, that they can trust and say, hey, let's go ahead and start getting these things down because we want to make sure we have you in advance. So that's one of the biggest things I'm noticing right now is that I'm booking way in advance further than I ever have in the past.
Whenever we talk about the speaking industry, we talk about the types of events that you are booking. I think it's easy to kind of lump a lot of different things together. So maybe we kind of categorize here because there are keynotes, there are workshops, there are breakouts, there are seminars. You kind of do a mix of a couple of different things there. Are there some that you're seeing that are trending up more than others, or what's kind of the breakdown of your business and any trends that you're kind of noticing on a micro level in that way?
Well, I noticed that the legacy events, what I mean by that, these are the annual events that associations and organizations are doing. Those are stronger than ever and they're growing. In fact, I'm hearing this a lot when I go to these events. Oh, this was a record attendance. We set a record in attendance. So those legacy events are really strong right now, which means they're growing in the number of people showing up, which means they have a bigger budget to throw out there for resources and things like that. I'm also seeing a rise in seasonal events. So where I'm hearing this a lot, our spring conference, our winter institute, our fall conference. So these are like seasonal events. And I'm also seeing a rise in more niche events. Like this is our spring event for our membership team, or this is our summer event for our human resources group. And so they're getting a little bit smaller as far as niche goes within associations, which is interesting. I also see associations and organizations that are willing to do a deeper dive So if you're a speaker that is willing to go deeper and do workshops, one of the reasons why we created Workshop Mastery at the Speaker Lab is that this is something that a lot of organizations are more apt to do, where they're willing to do the deeper dive. Now, the type of speakers that I'm seeing that are really starting to jump on these trends, Grant, and they're doing really well, are speakers that are relationship driven. I think we're going to talk a little bit this more as we do our podcast episode today, because I'm starting to see what I see. There's two types of speakers out there. There's relationship speakers and there's event speakers. You know what I'm talking about? Where they're just looking for events. Yeah, right. I'm a speaker for hire. But then there's the speakers that are like, I want to develop the relationships with the event planner and grow with that event planner. And so I'm seeing relationship driven speakers getting more love out there than some of my friends that are just going out and they're speakers for hire. So I noticed that. The long game speakers, these are people that are in it for the long game. And they're like, okay, I'm addressing this event. And if I don't get it this year, that's fine. I would tell you that something that is not attractive is desperation, and you could tell it, you could smell it from a speaker when they're just trying to get the gig, they're trying to get the money, as opposed to speakers like, hey, I want to add value, and I'm willing to go in a long-term type of commitment with you. Those are the ones I'm seeing. Also, the speakers that are the most organized right now, the ones that have systems in place, that have the follow-up process in place. I noticed those speakers are the ones that are really nailing these legacy events, these spring, these seasonal conferences more than others.
For a speaker, especially like that is early on in their career and they're trying to build and grow their speaking business, because so much of the business is a relationship business, the challenge is that relationships take time. And so early on, it can feel a little bit more transactional, and that I'm just trying to get my foot in the door to book a gig and then hopefully, turn that into several gigs over the course of the next decade or a couple of decades. But is there anything that you're noticing that like new speakers should be doing, and maybe like a mindset shift or actions that we should be taking that helps them to get their foot in the door and to start building that relationship? Because it's like in any type of context, whenever you're looking to someone that you want to build a relationship with, and you're kind of like, man, they have more to offer me than I feel like I have to offer them. How do we change our mindset to know that, no, actually, we still bring something to the table, and how should we be approaching that?
Yeah, I would shoot for those legacy events, Grant, because they're year in and year out, right? They're usually pretty robust. They've got a lot of opportunities, and there's different ways in which you can add value at these legacy events. And if you go into it with, hey, I want to add value, I'm here to support you, and you open up to that, then there's so many different ways in which you can get involved. The easiest way for a new speaker to get in their foot in the door is to do a breakout session. Those are so numerous. There are a lot of them. And it's really easy to get on a breakout room if you are intentional and reaching out to the event planners. And so that's the first way I got in. In fact, I'm just sharing with you what I did. So doing the breakout session and then adding value there. And then while you're there, hey, how else can I support you? Hey, let me take care of handing out those sheets out there for your keynote speaker. Let me, if you need someone on a panel session, I'll do that. And so what I do is I just listen to the event planner, I add value, and then I do a follow-up with the event planner and say, hey, I love that. It was fun working with you. What can we do next time? Well, now we got this other thing coming up. Maybe you could be on our panel discussion for that. Great. I'd love to do that. And so just keep adding value until the next thing you know, they're like, hey, why don't you come up on our breakout stage? In fact, our keynote stage. In fact, this is how I did it with you, Grant. If you think about it, when you and I first got together and started talking, I was a student, and we went back and forth. I'd add value. You would ask me to be on some of your committees, like, hey, we're thinking about launching this new product. Eric, would you give us some feedback? So I was just adding value. And then one day you said, hey, why don't you come up on my podcast? Because we developed a relationship.
Yeah.
And then 455 podcasts later, you and I have done that many episodes together, all started with just adding value. And then finally you said, hey, how about you come on my podcast? Why don't you come up on the main stage? And then you said, hey, Eric, I'd like to work with you on a more formal capacity. Eric, would you like to be on my leadership team? And now we've got this really robust relationship just by playing the long game. So it works in all facets, doesn't change when it comes to speaking as well.
Yeah, very true. Okay, let's shift gears for a second. So, 4 years ago or so, working at the summer of the pandemic and world's falling apart. I remember during that time, a couple months prior, you and I spent a lot of time together working on a new program teaching virtual speaking. And for a little while during, there in 2020 especially, virtual was the only game in town. And so even for a little while into 2021, 2022, it was kind of like, well, hey, virtual is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Are you still doing any virtual? How does virtual fit into your business? Like, what's the landscape of virtual speaking right now?
Yeah. First of all, I would say virtual is not going away. Second of all, I would say it's changed drastically to what it was 4 years ago, right? 4 years ago, it replaced speaking. Now it doesn't. Now it's a supplement. It complements it. So it doesn't go away. There is a place for virtual, and there's a place for virtual in your business. In fact, I would implore all speakers need to have a virtual component to your speaking business if you want to be seen as a serious speaker that's out to play in this space, because events, decision makers, they need some of that virtual as a component as with their offerings. Like, for example, associations that I'm seeing, Grant, when it comes to virtual, they like doing quick hit webinars, right, to add value to their members, because not all members can travel, but some of these members need continuing education credits. They need certain things they got to check off, and so virtual is a way to do that. One of the nice things about the pandemic, it did prove the concept of virtual, that we could all do it if we have to. So we know it's proven. Now it's how do we use it? So I would say industries that require continuing education credits, like lawyers, doctors, engineers, stuff like that, that's a great way to do it virtually. So if I'm a doctor, I'm busy. If I'm a lawyer, I'm busy. I need to get this CEU, but I don't want to travel to do it. But I can go to my association. I could do a virtual half-day workshop or a 2-hour session with a speaker that knows what they're talking about. That stuff all day long is going to be available. So virtual has really replaced having to go physically. Back when I worked in utility business and I had to get my own continuing education credits, no joke, I would have to go to San Antonio one part of the year. Then I'd have to go out to San Diego another part of the year. I didn't have a lot of time to do that. Now I could do that all virtually and meet that. So there's definitely a component of that. It's not going away. And we talked about getting your foot in the door as a new speaker. One way to get your foot in the door with any organization is if you could do a quick hit webinar for them. They love that kind of stuff. And that's another way to get your foot in the door. So virtual is definitely part of the game for sure. And it's not going anywhere.
Are most of the virtual things that you're doing kind of in supplement or in addition to other things that you're doing with the same client? Or are you doing any like just one-off, I work with this client and all they ask me to do is some type of virtual presentation?
Not as much as I used to. I used to do it much more. That's kind of gone away. Part of it's too is, Grant, I think it's you get what you seek, right? So I'm not really seeking virtual only. I'm looking to add value to events and event planners that I want to work with. So it's like, hey, I can do this, plus I can do this. And so before the pandemic, it was never that. It was never I can do this, plus I can do virtual. Is I can do this only. What virtual's done is allows me to, number one, create a greater margin for my speaking business, because I can do a keynote for an event planner and then do 3 follow-up webinars and charge for that and not have to travel. Whereas before I'd have to travel to all 4 of those events. So yeah, it's more of a supplement on top of, I'm not doing virtual only, but I'm also not seeking that out. If I was seeking it out just to do that, there is a space for that. It's just, that's not part of my business model.
So in the past year or so, when we talk about, again, kind of macro things similar to the pandemic, in the past year or so, we've seen a lot of economic shifts with just in the world and the economy and ups and downs there. Is there anything that you're seeing as relates to that within the speaking industry? Has inflation affected speaker fees? Are event budgets cut or restricted? Everything just costs more? What are you seeing on the financial side?
Yeah. So what I would say is this is one area that is extremely industry dependent, right? So the speaking industry is many, many, many industries within that. So, you have certain industries, when you have downturn economy for whatever reason, certain industries are impacted in different ways. Like during the pandemic, the hospitality industry was pretty much gone for a while, right? That was affected differently, but streaming services and entertainment, stuff like that went up virtually. And so it depends on the industry, but so to give you some broad strokes though, some things that I'm hearing as I talk to different event planners. Now, I'm in the utility space. I also have several friends in the event space, in the banking industry, some in the medical industry. I've dabbled in the veterinarian where they, sometimes people hire me and speak in that event in that area. And so some broad things I'm hearing, it's not necessarily that budgets are cut, but what I would tell you is that event planners, in my opinion, the way I've seen it, they tend to be intentional though with their monies that they're using. What do I mean by that? Well, I think instead of saying, hey, I've got a $100,000 budget to do these events, it's, yeah, I got $100,000, but I need to see a return on that $100,000. I've seen that conversation come up more and more. So tangible is very important. In fact, I had a breakfast this week actually with a high-end decision maker in the Fortune 500 world. And he was telling me that about a speaker that was talking to him about this thing he wanted to do with his leadership and executives and things like that. And he said, that's fine, but I need to see a clear ROI, a clear return on the investment. I need to see how it's going to increase my sales specifically or reduce my costs specifically before I jump into that. I just don't want to be motivated and then my guys feel better afterwards. No, we got to have a return on the investment. So this comes down to, I think, when it comes to the whenever you have like any type of volatility in the industry, Grant, this is where I think relationship speakers thrive and event focused speakers don't. Okay. So let's say that I'm in an industry that suddenly it's gotten a little tight. We're still going to have events, but we're going to be a little bit more intentional. I'm going to lean to the people that I know, not to the people that I don't know. That's why anybody listen to this, if you have to choose a lane and choose the type of business you want to run, really focus on those relationships, because relationships survive up and down economies. They thrive in up economies and they survive in down economies. So that's something that's very, very important. Also, I find that if you are a speaker that has an industry background, lean into that. What I mean by that, I'll use me as an example. So I have an industry background in the utility space, but my message is rise above chaos. Grant, I could speak on that in almost any industry, but I have a background in the utility industry. So if they have to hire a speaker, right, and they've got limited budget, they're going to lean towards the speaker that can speak to the industry with an industry background, as opposed to a speaker that speaks on the exact same thing, but doesn't have the industry background. That's why leaning into an industry that you know and have credibility with is so important. Here's the other thing that I'm seeing with event planners. Event planners are more willing right now to do package deals with speakers as opposed to just single hits. What do I mean by that? So you're an event planner and you've got a budget, okay? Let's say that you have 7 different things you want to do. And if you talk to 7 different speakers, that may cost you $100,000 to do that, right? As opposed to, what if you were able to go to one speaker and that one speaker can help you with those 7 different events and do it for $75,000? It's a win-win. The speaker gets a nice long-term income that's coming in at $75,000, and the event planner saves $25,000. So package deals is becoming a thing. And I've had a lot of these discussions with events that say, hey, we'd love to hire you for 3 or 4 different events. Can we go ahead and do that in a package deal? It reduces the cost a little bit, but also is nice for me. So that is something I think that I'm seeing more and more in industries that are being more intentional with their budgets.
The counterpoint to that is sometimes events say, hey, you did a great job. Everybody loved you. However, we just want a different, fresh face. We want we want to wait a little bit for the audience to turn over. We're going to bring you back in 3 or 4 years. We just want to give it a minute. We're worried, we don't want just you to come back and do your same talk over and over and over. So how do you kind of push back and say, no, like, I'm not a one trick pony. There's a variety of different things that I can bring to your audience and continue to provide value.
Yeah. Thank you for that softball question. You're so good at this. I appreciate that. So the way you ask that question, that's an event speaker asking that question, right? That's an event speaker mentality. So if you think about an event planner, a lot of times event planners don't have just one event that they're managing. They have 7 or 8 different events and they serve different audiences. So that is true. If you looked at just a singular event and you said, Eric, you're going to speak at our annual convention this year, well, you probably don't want to bring me back for that same annual convention next year. However, this is the difference between event speakers and relationship speakers. If you're the event planner and you've got the annual convention, but you've also got the spring member services conference, you've also got the fall CEO and director conference, you've got 7 or 8 different ones you manage, then what happens is, if I'm willing and open to have the conversation with you and say, hey, how can I serve you, not in just this event, but those other events? What I'm doing is I'm solving several problems for you. Number one, I'm taking away, you have to find speakers for all these different slots, and it's probably going to be a little less expensive for you. And I'm a known commodity. You know what you're going to get. That's one less thing you got to stress about. So the way you do this, the way you set it up is every event that we teach this in the Speaker Lab, every event we do, Grant, we always have an exit interview. In the exit interview, one of the questions we have, in fact, I just did an exit interview today. You love that. I love the fact that we talk about this in theory, and I'm telling you, I actually did it today, right? It's like we're not just making this stuff up. We actually do it.
Right.
So I did an exit interview today, and one of the questions we ask is, hey, let's talk about what plans you have for the rest of the year going into next year. Let's talk about how I can serve you. A couple things comes for that. Number one, you set the expectation up with the event planner that you want to continue working with them. And number two, you know what's amazing about human dynamics? People lean into your expectations and they're like, oh, okay, he's expecting to work with me. I didn't think about that. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that. So that's how we approach it.
Going back to kind of from an economic standpoint, when you have kind of ebbs and flows in the marketplace, that can also impact topics and fees, and some are going to be more in supply and demand than others. So I'm always a little bit cautious to talk about this, because what we don't want to do is, this is important for all speakers to know, is you don't want to just constantly be chasing like, hey, what's the hot topic? What's the thing that's working or trending? And how do I hop on that train? And we'll just ride that as long as possible. And then what's the next big popular topic? And, AI is popular. So let's just talk. I don't know anything about AI, but let's try to talk about AI for a minute. And then when that fades, then we'll talk about whatever the next thing is. So, but are there some topics that you're seeing that are in more demand, or that there are more fees being tossed around for?
Yeah, well, I would tell you the trump card here is anything that's industry specific, like the industry you're speaking in, that has a clear ROI always wins the game every single time.
Yeah.
So Grant, if you're a chiropractor and you have your own business, right? And I'm going to a conference with a bunch of people like you that's a chiropractor that owns your small business, and I can come up and speak to you on how you can better communicate with your customers to turn them to increase your revenues by 25%, because you're going to get those folks to come back over and over and over again. I can solve that problem for you. You're going to hire me right off the bat. That's why it's important for anyone listening, think about what your expertise is, because we all have a certain expertise. And if you can communicate on that, that's always going to be top shelf, right, with that industry. So if you can align your expertise with a specific industry and then really bring tremendous value with a clear ROI, you're always going to win the game. But let's go a little higher, talk broad. Some things that never, ever go out of vogue is anything that's leadership based, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can show folks how they can be better leaders during an election year, for instance, or better leaders with a new generation coming up, or a better leader in times of chaos, there's always room for that. So if you have a leadership bent to your speaking, there's going to be some things there. A buzz term I'm hearing a lot is resilience. So if you can speak on resilience, don't chase the topic resilience. But if your topic has something in it that can talk to resilience, then if you can put that in the mix, that's a buzz term I'm hearing quite a bit. Anything that's human dynamics related that is generational when it comes to communication. One of the things that it's interesting in the workforce, I read somewhere, Grant, that this is the first time in history that we've had 4 generations that are working together. That's the first time. Right. So the boomers are living much longer. They're in the workspace longer than when they were growing in the industry. We have 4 generations. So if you can come in and speak on how all 4 generations can communicate with one another, connect with one another from a human dynamic standpoint, that's really hot right now. Anyone that can speak on the future. So if you're a futurist, that is big time hot. And the reason why is you got to never let a potential catastrophe go to waste, which is the election year. So nobody knows what's going to happen in January of 2025. And so there's a lot of unknown there, and how it's going to affect the economy, which whoever's elected, this is going to be a really big year on talking about the future. So I've seen futurists on the stages quite a bit. So if that's something you do, that's big. You mentioned AI. AI is a really hot topic right now. So if you speak on something that can talk about AI, just any part of it, if it's actually the technical piece of it, or how do you lead a team of people where AI is a big thing? How do you communicate? Anything that's AI related, that's definitely big. Another one that's huge, I'm hearing a lot, is anything that you can do that speaks to work-life balance. That's because the newer generation has an expectation of that, right? That the boomers didn't have to, that there was no expectation of work-life balance. Well, newer generations is a bigger expectation. The pandemic, I think, set that kind of that trend of work-life balance. And so anything you can do with that. Another one, because it's an election year, and only because I'm getting requests for it myself, is anything you could talk to about conflict management, right? Because tensions are going up. conflict is going to increase. So how can you manage conflict at the workplace in a very healthy way during times when you're seeing maybe some stuff happen on TV that's kind of disturbing during the election, after the election, and how you manage that at the workplace? So conflict management. Now, on the flip side, there is one topic that was hot that I'm seeing kind of lose a little steam, and I'm neutral on this. It's just what I'm seeing. Is the DEI thing. So diversity, equity, inclusion had a really sharp increase. So if you and I were doing the state of the industry last year, we'd probably been saying this is definitely on the uptick. What I read the other day, a statistic with Fortune 500 companies, they've cut 42% of DEI jobs.
Wow.
Right? So it's on the downslope. So that's kind of quietly happening, but you're just not seeing a lot of requests on that. Now, if you're in this space, it doesn't mean you're no longer going to be a speaker. What it means is you need to take this idea, pull out the nuggets of it, like human dynamics, and can you repurpose it more in conflict management and things like that. So just saying I'm a DEI speaker now is not as trendy as it was maybe 12 months ago.
Well, to kind of piggyback on that last point there, part of the nature of being a speaker is you're kind of balancing, here's what I'm interested in, here's what I'm passionate about, here's what I'm knowledgeable on, here's what organizations, the industry is actually booking speakers to talk about. And so what that tends to mean is, like, over the course of your career, assuming you're going to be in this career for many, many years or a couple of decades, it's going to require you to pivot and make changes along the way as things are moving. And so how are you thinking about that currently in your own speaking business, and how might you suggest or recommend other speakers think about that in terms of like how they might be pivoting, and kind of almost think about like that Wayne Gretzky quote, go not to where the puck is, but where the puck's going to be. And so where do you feel like the puck is going to be in your business and maybe in the speaking industry as a whole, that you like, hey, I want to make sure I'm skating that direction?
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily, as in this case, knowing where the puck's going to be. If you want to take that analogy one step further, it's understanding the person who has the puck that's going to be sent it over to you, where they want to be. That's the key. That goes back to relationships, right? And so here's what I would say. As you're trying to navigate your speaking industry, and I look back on my career now, Grant, being a decade into it, the one thing I've always done really well is I focused on the relationship, and I held on to the platform that I deliver my message very loosely, right? So if you try to say, I'm just a keynote speaker, or I'm just a workshop speaker, or I just do virtual, and you say that, you're missing the boat. Instead, what you want to do is, if you understand the people that have to make the decisions to educate their audience, and you have a message that solves a problem for that audience, you have to be flexible to grow and evolve with the people that are hiring you. So if they need virtual content for whatever reason, and you can provide that with your message, that's fantastic. You are of value to that person. However, if they need you for pre-conference workshop, or they need you to be a panel discussion, or they need you to be able to do a video series, or they need you to do keynotes, or a combination of all those things, you become really valuable to that event planner, and you can pivot and evolve with that event planner. So I have relationships now doing this 10 years before the pandemic, and what they needed from me, during the pandemic and what they needed from me, and after the pandemic, what they needed from me. Now, the key thing is my message didn't change. I mean, I tweaked it and evolved with it. The platform in which I delivered it changed quite a bit, and it's constantly evolving. So let me give you an example. For whatever reason, they love me in Iowa. Maybe you can help me figure this out, but they love some Erick Rheam in Iowa. So I get to Iowa a lot. And there was one event planner there. In fact, you had her on your podcast, Katrina Davis. I don't know if you remember having her or not. So she started hiring me, and it started with keynotes. And then during the pandemic, it switched to webinars. And then after the pandemic, it switched to workshops. And then to the point now that I'm testing new material based on what I'm seeing and hearing out in my industry. And I went back to Katrina because I developed the relationships with her. And I said, hey, I'm testing this new concept, this new idea. I'd love to test it on your stage. She just signed a contract with me this week to go speak at her operations conference in October on an idea that I'm testing is going to add more value to her. The reason why she's willing to do that is because I've built up such relationship capital with her, evolving with her, delivering messages in ways that really served her. So now when I want to test the market, test the idea, she's willing to serve me. It's this give and take. It's a beautiful thing. It gets to the point now, because I've been so relationship driven, that I can call up an event planner and they'll just take my call and say, Eric, what do you got? I say, I got this idea. What do you think? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. In fact, I built that relationship with you, Grant, where I contact you all the time and say, hey, what do you think about this? You're like, I like it. Let's test the idea. Well, it works the same way in this. So what I would say is the bottom line is be willing and be flexible in the way you deliver your message and be open to that. And if you're open to do that and you evolve and grow with your audience, you're going to be good to go.
Well, kind of piggybacking on that, one of the things that we teach inside the Speaker Lab is the Speak framework. And so the last part of that process, the K, is knowing when to scale. And so that means, like, for most people watching, listening to this, they want to be speakers, but ultimately they have a message that they want to share. And speaking is just one way to go about doing that. So they're probably also interested, just like you, in maybe doing a book or a podcast or a course or coaching or consulting. And so we just talk about, like, you can do all the things, but you can't do all the things at once. So some things are going to come first, some things are going to come last. You got to be really intentional about that. And so you've done a great job of that. At this point, you have course material that you do a lot of coaching and consulting with various clients. You've got the book. And so you've got various other things, but that's all come on kind of the piggyback of building your speaking business. So how did you kind of think through and evaluate when was the right time to start to add some of these things in? And for a speaker who maybe, again, kind of somewhere in that process of starting to build that momentum, there's the tension of, I want to just keep laser focused on booking gigs, because I know that that's kind of the bread and butter. And almost in some ways, that's part of the flywheel that creates some of these other opportunities. But I also want to take, maybe 10, 20% of my energy, attention, and focus and put it on some of these other things that may not require me to get on a plane or travel and actually go present the material. So how are you thinking about that today? How would you recommend other speakers think about that today, given the state of the industry, of what some other things are that a speaker can generate revenue and an impact without always having to leave?
Yeah. So my opinion on this is, if you want to be a long-term speaker, and if you're not thinking about scaling, you're not going to be a long-term speaker, is the way I look at it. It's just the way it is. You could be laser focused, but if you have one song and that's it, that everybody listens to, that song's eventually going to wear out over time. So you got to be able to deliver that in a different way. And so I would say that it's not really about timing. It's more about being open and aware of opportunities that arise, that you can solve a problem or step into that opportunity with your message. This is the key. The key is, you don't just jump onto things because you want to make money. What you want to do is look for ways and opportunities to leverage your message to solve problems in different ways. That's going to allow you to diversify your business. So I'll give you an example. So Alabama, another place they love me. Nobody knows why, but they do. They love me in Alabama. And so I worked with a group down in Alabama, and they asked me to do a workshop. And I went in just to do that workshop. But in the exit interview, they said, we want to do this again. What can you do for us next year? I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I said, all right, I got an idea. And I threw an idea out how we could continue the conversation, this workshop. They bought the idea, so I did it. Then in the exit interview, this is year 3, Grant, they said, okay, now here's a problem we have, is you come in and you teach all of our employees, but we're bringing on new employees every year. How can we solve that problem? So that was a problem they presented to me. And I think, okay, how can I take my message and solve that problem? That's when I came up with the Rise Above Chaos onboarding kits, a kit that I would ship to them. It would be an online course, self-paced, that all the students go through. And then I would come in and do an activation workshop. I just literally made that up. Like, let's just try it and see if it works. But because the opportunity presents itself, then I did that. Now, once I had the onboarding kit, now I'm like, what do I do with this? Okay, I can scale this now and take it out to a bigger audience, because I developed for this one client, and I can scale it to other clients. So it created a whole new revenue stream for me, because, Grant, all I did was I just asked questions of my client. What do you need from me? They posed an issue. I said, okay, I can solve that issue. Let me solve it with this solution. And I took that solution and I scaled it. Then they asked me to come back again. This is year 4. Now I was running out of material. So I'm like, okay, I need a partner with another speaker that can add more value. So I set up a partnership with this other speaker. We came in, I did the first part, they did the rest, and we made really good money to do that. Then this year we had another exit interview, and they said, what's the next step? And I said, I think the next step is this planning system. So with my message, I can create a planner that can allow your audience, because my message is, it's a habitual thing. It's called the 7 elements of the perfect day. So how can I take the 7 elements of the perfect day and then allow my audience to manage it on a daily basis? Well, a planning system makes sense. They bought it from me, Grant. They bought it. They literally paid for it. I haven't created the planning system yet. I'm going to create it now. But once I create it, it's not going to be just for them. Now I can take it. I can bring it out to all these other folks I've worked for, and I can sell it to them, and I can take it out to the masses. I scaled it up. So over that 4-year period, I just walked you through, I had 2 situations where I had to solve a specific problem for my client that allowed me to take that solution and scale it and bring it to other clients. Now, solution 1 happened to be an online course. That's residual. The second one happens to be a planning system that also is residual because they're going to give me an annual subscription for all 4 planners a year. And I already got a customer that's already bought it. That's fantastic. Now, just to give you an example of a totally separate one, and this is in my specific industry where I wrote a book for this industry, and we created a course out of it. And then they said, okay, let's do it online. So I created an online course for them on this. I get a percentage of every student that goes through it. So every student that goes through it, I get a percentage. So they send me like a royalty check. And then based on that, we decided to create a software solution for this particular problem that we're solving for this major group out in DC. So I met with my team today. We're in the process of building this software solution based on my message, by the way, that we're going to scale it and take it to the masses, or when I say the masses, within my industry. Yeah. So that's a 4th product that we're scaling. All I'm doing is just solving problems along the way and scaling as I go.
But one thing I like there is you are being proactive in providing solution opportunities for the clients that you're working with versus just you asking them, hey, what else should I do? It's kind of like a handyman coming to the house and saying, hey, is there anything that you need me to fix? Well, now the onus is on me to come up with something versus like, hey, I drove by and I noticed that, your hedges need trimmed or whatever. It's like, would you like me to take care of that for you? And so in your case, same thing. And now that the client is coming to you saying, hey, every time we ask you, what else you got? You're going into your bag of tricks, so to speak, and pulling out good solution because you also continue to get more and more ingrained with them. And it also sounds like that's much more of being a relationship speaker versus just being an event speaker. So to kind of put a bow on all of this, like what would you recommend is like a next step for a speaker? And this may be in kind of different stages of their career and kind of where they're at, what they're looking to accomplish or do. Like you mentioned, you've been at this for a decade, you've been at it for a while. But for a speaker who's going like, all right, I kind of get an idea of what's happening, what some of the trends are, what's happening within the industry. Now what? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. So you always want to lean into, I'd say, the 5 closest relationships you have that's going to get you on stage the quickest. And the reason why I say it that way is everybody listening to this is in different phases of their career. Okay. So if you've already been speaking, the question I would ask you is, who are the 5 event planners you enjoyed working with the most? And do you have an event booked with them already? And if the answer is no, what are you waiting for? Get back with them immediately. Let's get on their stages. Let's turn those 5 events planners into 5 more events or 10 more events. If you are just getting started, there are 5 people within your circle of influence that you need to reach out to that's going to get you in front of somebody that may get you in front of somebody that's going to get you at their event. And just knowing that you just want to get at the event. Okay. Now, if you're a new speaker and you get to the event, all you're doing is you're looking for that relationship, right? That's the key. So at any stage of the game, the one thing I would say is, and by the way, I'm sharing with what we teach people in the speaker lab, Grant. This is the very first thing, one of the very first things we teach them is let's get out to those 5 people. Let's leverage those 5 relationships immediately and see where that takes us. If those 5 relationships get me nowhere, I go to the next 5 and I go to the next 5 and I continue doing that until I get on the stages. But it's all about those relationships. So everybody listen to this right now. Think about it in your mind right now. Who are 5 people that you can connect with that's going to allow you to get on those stages and then reach out to those folks immediately?
Really good stuff. Erick, always appreciate the time, man. We don't know how many episodes you've been on, but this one puts you again. You're just putting some distance between you and the rest of the pack. That's fine. Creating that margin, that buffer there. So, hey, we always appreciate it, man, and appreciate you sharing your wisdom and insights with us.
Awesome. Grant, I appreciate you, and I thank you so much for the opportunity. You mean so much to me. The Speaker Lab means a lot to me, and this industry, speaking industry, is fantastic. We just got to get more good people out there because there's room for everybody. Let's get out there and let's do it.